Okay, now on the Innovation Show, John Dennehy, CEO and founder of Zartis. Welcome to the show, John.
Thanks very much.
We thought it'd be interesting to first, before we go into what Zartis does and the skills gap that we see in the Irish market from a digital ecosystem perspective and a startup perspective, to talk a bit about you, John, and your background and how you ended up setting up essentially a recruitment business around this ecosystem.
So if we go back into the mists of time, anybody who's my age, I'm 43, will remember the dot-com era quite well. I'd worked in South Africa and Australia for a couple of years. I came back to Dublin and I worked with a startup company that was sold to Aircom in 1999. I then set up my own company, which was also called Zartis.com, along with 5 excellent co-founders. We grew the company really quickly. Over a period of 9 months, we grew to 40 people, and we sold the company for $18 million. We had no outside investors, so we were on the front page of newspapers and on national television. And then a year later, the internet trapdoor opened, the whole thing fell apart, and we lost everything. So after that, I co-founded another company with my good friend Barry O'Neill and a Japanese colleague called Hiroshi Okamoto. So we licensed mobile phone games from Konami, one of the biggest games developers and publishers in the world. So we licensed their back catalogue. We started publishing their games in Europe and the US. We grew the company again to about 40 people. We set up a small development studio in Dublin and Cork, and we started building games for companies like Disney and Sony Computers. We sold that company in 2008 to a Chinese media group, and I started looking around at my next opportunity, and one thing that struck me was the lack of software to help small to medium-sized companies find talent and attract talent. And also I felt that the level of the quality of service in the recruitment sector wasn't particularly good in terms of IT. So we started off, first of all, building a software product which is now called HireHive.io, and that's basically a recruitment CRM for small to medium-sized companies. We have about 150 clients based in anywhere. They're from Kuala Lumpur, Cape Town, London. They could be basically anywhere. And that's a software as a service model. They pay a monthly subscription fee to use the software. From the work we were doing in developing that product, we found that a lot of the customers we were dealing with were saying the real problem was that they were finding there was a shortage of IT talent in Ireland. So they asked us, could we provide additional services to provide recruitment for them specifically focused on software developers. We're bootstrapping the product, so it was a great way for us to get revenue to further the software development. But actually what happened was the recruitment services part of the business became actually bigger than the software side. So today we're an integrated software and services recruitment company. We have 6 people in Cork and 12 people based in Madrid. Most of the Cork office is focused on software development, and most of the Madrid office is focused on recruiting IT staff from all around Europe and bringing them to Dublin and Cork.
So your background, this is because it's funny, we see this a lot with founders we've come across, and co-founders. When there's a team of people, it's usually somebody from a specific background, whether that be sales in a certain sector, coming together with a technologist. But in fact, what you did was you've come from the startup culture, the technology culture, the background of that, have had ups and downs. And out of that, you've went, actually, I have a talent for spotting talent and bringing the talent to companies. And so you're matchmaking that talent. But an interesting thing, because a few weeks ago we had Justina Mazzoni on from Coder Dojo, and we talked about what Coder Dojo is doing for the future of there's such demand for startup individuals. And by that, I mean the ecosystem that goes with that, from coders, different types of coders, PHP, Java, etc., that there's not enough coming through the system right now for the demand that's in Ireland right now. So we've all these big startups, big tech giants here, all looking for people locally, but we don't have enough people trained locally. So how do you see that playing out right now in Ireland? There's a shortage? Is there a skills shortage?
There's definitely a skills shortage. I mean, if the value of an education is measured on preparing people for the workplace and preparing people for the skills that are needed in the workplace, the Irish educational system has clearly failed in terms of preparing people to have IT skills. if the purpose of education is different, to educate people with different languages or provide them with critical reasoning skills and better learning abilities, that's a different question, or it's a different story. But if we're measuring our education system on the ability to provide graduates or people out of school who have good IT skills, we failed miserably at that. I think if you go back to Coder Dojo and look at James Welton and when he initially came up with the idea, that was the genesis of the idea. Like, he was really strong on computer programming at school. He'd learnt it himself outside of school, but there was no way for his skills to be recognized in any way in terms of getting points for a university entrance. So he's done an amazing job, and the management team running Coder Dojo are doing an amazing job. There is a skills shortage in almost every Western country in the world, so it's not unique to Ireland by any means. It's a global issue, or certainly a Western world issue. To solve that skills gap, you can train people, which we'd all like to see Irish people being trained, and we'd like to see full employment and great jobs going to people here, who we know and are related to us and have gone through the education system. But you can't train people to be software developers quickly, or not quickly enough. Like, the real demand in industry is for experienced software developers. If you want to create a Java developer with 5 years experience, it's going to take at least 10 years to create that Java developer, because they have to go through, computer science degree, they have to go through some kind of learning program afterwards, get their 5 years of experience, and that's a 10-year process. So what Coder Dojo is doing is a brilliant initiative, and it's definitely going to have an impact on what happens in, the 2020s. But right now, today, there are companies that can't grow, and there's economic development being held back because we don't have enough software developers in the country.
So how does Zartis help with that gap?
So we started looking at this issue from a commercial point of view about 4 years ago. We started working on a project called Make It in Ireland, where we were actually it was funded by the largest tech companies in Ireland. So we got funding from Google, Facebook, Twitter, Microsoft. All the big guys put money in to brand a website and an online social media campaign to help attract more IT professionals into the country. So the big multinationals have a shortage of multilingual people with some IT skills. They're also looking for very strong software developers, but the bulk of the jobs in the multinationals are not software development jobs. They're multilingual sales and support jobs, right? But just in pure numbers, that's the way it plays out. In the indigenous Irish tech companies like Phineas and Finergo and Datalex, StoryToys, where they're actually looking for people, it's with the software developers. They're not hiring for the multilingual skills nearly as much. They're looking for pure software developers. So with Make It in Ireland, we started to learn a lot about where people were willing to move from, where the talent was, all around Europe and indeed outside of Europe. We then started working directly with individual companies in a similar way that a recruitment agency would work. We would actually go out and headhunt the type of software developers that they needed to hire. Typically, they were coming from countries like Spain and Portugal, places hit by the economic recession. We'd reach out to them directly. We'd do video interviews with them, so it was all being done remotely. We'd screen them for communication skills, technical development skills, salary expectations, a reason they might move to Ireland, and then we'd talk to them about the opportunities that exist in Ireland, and we'd introduce them to client companies who would often hire them, and then we'd help them settle into Ireland.
Because it's funny when you step back and you look at this, it's like the IDA with Ken Finnegan on in episode 1 from the IDA. He's talking about IDA's main mission of bringing business to Ireland from IoT to every different aspect of the new world, new business models. Then you have the likes of Niamh Bushman, everybody working on the startup economy within Ireland. But then companies like Zartis are actually bringing filling the gaps in between. So it's all part of the same ecosystem. It's really interesting when you kind of step back and you go, okay, where's the gaps? You're spotting those gaps. You're finding the people, and then you're integrating. It reminds me of almost like rugby teams or sports teams. What they do when they bring in a foreign player is they find them an apartment they're happy with, then they integrate them, and they make sure they're integrated into the society because then they perform better, whatever their task may be it a job or sports or whatever it is. So, John, we're also joined by Peter Fabor from Surf Office as well. Peter, to ask you, so how does Surf Office work?
The concept is based that you can work remotely. You go to Portugal or Spain, and we have there the houses where there is the accommodation for you, the workspace, and community of other interesting people who do the same. Designers, developers, copywriters, marketing people, basically anyone who can work remotely.
Are you seeing a huge growth in this?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so this is, to segue with what John said, we're seeing a lot of progressive companies who are going, okay, I have a need right now for these companies and these people. And to move fast, I'm actually going to employ them remotely. They live in their own country, but where they're not working from their own apartments or from home, they're coming to places like Surf Office to work. And what is Surf Office? Is it an open space with open benches? Is that the concept?
Well, it's basically like a guest house with attached co-working space. So it's a regular workspace with fast internet. You can connect your computer, your laptop to external display. There are the meeting rooms if you need to have a Skype calls or to have the privacy. So it's like a normal co-working space, but there is the accommodation because you move to Lisbon for 1 or 2 weeks. You need the place to sleep. We don't have local people at all, only people from abroad. Our biggest market is in UK, US, and Germany, north of Europe.
And so they're attracted to the sun and the beach as well?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's connected a bit with surfing. A lot of people come to Surf Office to work and surf.
Yeah.
At least to try to surf or learn to surf. They have 1 or 2 surf lessons. So you have many different experiences at the same time. So you kind of live like a local because you work every day at hours in the office, but you are in Lisbon and you go for your lunch during the lunch break. So you don't have that feeling that you are a tourist. You have that feeling that for 2 weeks you are the local in Lisbon and you enjoy weekends and afternoons and evenings with other people who stay in Surf Office. You go to surf, you go for the dinner. That's the concept.
Very good. And how can people find you? Surf Office?
thesurfoffice.com or if you just write to Google.
And where locations, where are you based?
In Lisbon, in Portugal, and in Gran Canaria, Canary Islands, Spain.
So John, where's next in this whole world ecosystem?
So there's a continuing kind of ebb and flow of migration patterns across Europe. For the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen obviously big migration pattern from the south of Europe and the east of Europe to the north and the west. So we've been probably a net beneficiary of that in the Irish tech sector, in that we've got a lot of Spanish and Portuguese software developers over the last couple of years. My colleague in studio with us from the Surf Office is from the Slovak Republic. We've seen some great developers come from his country. So what's starting to happen, though, is that the economies like Spain are bouncing back. So there's about 60% more opportunities today for Java developers in Spain than there was 12 months ago. So what we're starting to see happen is that mobility is slowing down, especially if it's purely driven by the economy. You know, there's no unemployed Java developers pretty much in Europe anymore, anywhere. So it's getting harder to get people to move from one area to another. What we're seeing is 2 things happening because of that. One is companies are acknowledging it and they're opening up to candidates from outside of the European Union. So in Ireland, you can hire somebody from Brazil or South Africa where there's a lot of mobility. And you can get a work permit for those people, a critical skills permit. If they earn over 35,000 euros per year and they're a software developer, you can get them a permit to work here, which typically takes about 6 weeks and costs about 1,000 euros. So we expect to see a lot more companies in Ireland getting work permits for non-EU candidates over the next 5 years. The other big change that we're seeing is that as the demand for skills increases, but the supply doesn't increase at the same rate, more and more power is shifting towards the candidate.
So John Dennehy, CEO and founder of Zartis.com, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.